Hello and welcome. My name is Richard Capone, and today we're going to be starting our webinar shortly, Why and How Improving Math Scores and Scaling Success. Today we have with us Christina Berragon, who is our Customer Success Specialist, and myself, I'm the CEO of Let's Go Learn. But before I begin, I'm going to talk about, so first the agenda. I'm going to do one slide on who we are, and then I'm also going to then jump into some baseline factors of why math performance is low. And I think this is really important to have these in your back pocket as you are trying to drive change, because a lot of the stuff, the baseline factors, have to do with your own initiatives at your districts or your schools, okay? And then the next thing we're going to jump into is some case studies of what 5 schools or districts have done to overcome low math scores. So we're going to actually give you some ideas, and then we're going to do a short demo of our system, and then we'll take questions and answers. So again, I'm going to go fast. Okay, so I founded Let's Go Learn in 2000 with Dr. McCollum from UC Berkeley. We launched our first assessment when computer adaptive wasn't even a term. Our first assessment worked over a modem. But the real key here is we knew that data has to drive and find out why is the student struggling, right? And that's really important. And so we really wanted to have a very, very granular diagnostic assessment platform, and that's driving all the stuff that we have today. Okay, first factor here. First thing to understand is math is like a foreign language. It builds on itself. So a lot of times people say, oh, I'm teaching 5th grade math. I'm teaching volume. I don't need to go into the skills that are prerequisites, right? But that's not true. Yes, you could teach someone volume, but if they don't know how to do area of a circle, of a triangle, of a square, they can't calculate volume because they can never get the math and take it to the next step. So we have to realize that all modern math standards require in the fine print that you understand the basic math skills, right? So this is really important. This is why from the data we know the reason why 6th graders, 7th graders, 8th graders are struggling and are many years behind is because they don't have the basic skills mastered, all right? So this is an important thing. You have to get this across to your teams and understand you have to address skills that are many years below. The next factor is modern math, whether it's in Common Core, Texas, Arizona, Indiana, anywhere, they're very broad. So this is a mapping of all the skills and concepts that are taught across modern math. So numbers and operations, measurement, data analysis, geometry, algebra. If you zoom in there, you see these are all the different skills that get introduced within different tracks, so to speak. We call them subtests. Because it's so broad, there's no room for review, right? And review does not happen. Let's be clear about this. Most math classes have pacing guides. They stick to their pacing guides, and they have very little room for review. A lot of times they say in the core materials, oh, we have room built in, there's scaffolding built in, but you know what? It's not enough. So we have to accept that fact. I guess it's opinion actually, but we have to accept that and move forward from there, okay? That's the second factor. The next factor is, what's happening is, let's look at the 6th grade student. If a 6th grade student, let's say your school has around 30% proficiency in math, that means about only 14 to 17% of your students are on grade at the beginning of 6th grade, and this is grade level skills, and by the end of the year, they're gonna be at 7th grade. So you have this slope right here, 1 year and 1 year time. If 20 to 25% of your kids will be a year below, and then 50 to 60% of your kids will be 2 years or more below. These two groups are not gaining 1 year and 1 year time. So therefore, and as a matter of fact, their gain is very, very low by the time you hit 6th grade. So we're dealing with the fact that if you want to close the gap, you have to have an acceleration rate of 5x or greater, okay? And this just sort of illustrates what you would do for a summer school intervention. You need to have 5 to 10x over your summer to get these two group of students up to beginning of 7th grade. Anyway, this is something else if you're interested in, we could talk about it. This data is calculated based on some correlations with PARC and SBAC, so it's pretty hardcore, solid data. So we know this is the profile of a typical 6th grade class that had 30% proficiency, all right? All right, next factor. A lot of times we think, oh, let's just take our students who are behind and let's put them into an intervention group, right? If you do put them in an intervention group, realize that they're not the same. You can't just put your best teacher and say, here's 25 kids, work with them. their profiles are very different. This is 5 random students we took. These are real students, and we took these students and we put them into, we looked at their profile, and we see that the profile is very, very different. So this is, for instance, is fractions, and fractions has this range. This one student has a 2nd grade skill in fractions, another one has 6.5. Here's something else in a measurement. So what this shows you is the spread of students' abilities within the different subtests of mathematics, okay? So again, you have to have something that's able to personalize. That's factor 4. Okay, so now it's important that you take those 4 factors, you internalize them, bring them to your teams, and make a plan based on that. Now, here are what some schools are doing to address this, all right? This one's Ridley, Pennsylvania. Background, they had very low math scores in middle school. They had an intense pacing guide. They didn't feel like they had the ability to really diverge from their pacing guide, and they were not able to really introduce intervention into their regular class period. So what they did was they added a 7th period. They literally took, I don't know what it was, 10 minutes from each period or 5 minutes, and they created a 7th personalized learning period. And in that period, students would work on math, could work on ELA. I think mainly they focused on math because that was their initiative. And they did use our LGL Edge, which is a personalized learning program it's just amazing. It uses the data, fills the gaps. But they turned their district around in their middle schools by doing this strategy here, okay? So this is one strategy. Downey, same thing, low middle school math scores. This is what at one school, intense pacing guide, not able to introduce intervention. So same scenario, actually. The solution, they used extra PE hours for math intervention. So students normally just legally are supposed to have so many PE hours. They said, okay, well, Richard's already met his PE hours. So, you know, even though obviously it's controversial, but they just were running out of time. So they pulled those students and rotated them into teacher prep period, and they had those teachers, they paid them a little extra to take care of these students and just sort of monitor them while they were on LGL Edge. Again, they had amazing gains, improvements. We actually have a case study on them. I think it was 11 and 15 point gain on their state test, all right? Montebello, this is another interesting case study, a little bit older, overall low math scores, you know, no strong intervention existed at the time. They had a strong federal programs department. And what they did was they used the assessments to target near proficient students in summer school. And so what they did was their summer school was only 14 days. So they did all the planning ahead of time in the spring, targeted the students, had the diagnostic assessments ready, and then they took those students and put them into intensive ELA and math. I think they ended up getting 0.25 to 0.35 years gain in 14 days across 450 plus students for 2 consecutive summers, right? That's pretty amazing. Think about it, 14 days, the students had a quarter year to 0.35 years gain, right? And it proved to be consistent. And again, they did use LGL Math Edge. Essentially, you know, you're using an intensive online program that targets gaps, right? All right, here's another district. Little to no personalized learning, middle school to intense math curriculum, again, very similar background, right? Over 2 years, what they did was they built up a data inquiry cycle for all grades, right? So they said, hey, everyone in our school, we want to use data. And so this was a big initiative. They started doing a lot of PD. They started introducing flexible Fridays for all classes, even middle schools. So this is the key, because it was a district-wide initiative to use data, and they had a data inquiry cycle that their CNI folks introduced. So this was, you know, overall, they introduced this. They made flexible Fridays, and so they required everyone to really, really work in these small groups. And that's how they sort of bucked the trend, is since everyone's doing it, even middle schools had to do it, okay? Anyway, so they supported schools with true personalized learning tools. So obviously they also had to give them tools to work on that flexible Friday. But anyway, this is a way, it's hard if you just try to target your middle school math teachers and say you need to do small grouping, it may not work. But if it's sort of part of an overall district cycle, a data inquiry cycle, I think that's sort of another good approach to use. All right, and of course they had to have lots of PD to support the teachers. Okay, so here's another school district. I think it's an ISD, so it was in Texas. Okay, they had 0% proficiency in middle school math. Okay, totally. The students were basically we're lost, right? And so teachers and principals recognized the situation. They got permission to drop their standards-based core curriculum. Their standards-based core curriculum, 6th grade math for the 6th grade students, was way over everyone's head. So why use it? They needed to go back. And so in a sense, they flipped the classroom. So what they were doing is they had students working on personalized learning tools, intensely on these personalized learning programs that are filling their gaps, and then the teacher rotated around small groups of 3 to 5 students. Now you have to have some good data for that too, so you can know, oh, these 5 kids don't know decimal place value. I'm gonna help, unjam the log jam and teach it to them, and we're gonna really explain it. Oh, great. The next day, oh, these students don't really understand, adding fractions with unlike denominators. I'm gonna go ahead and work with those students. And so they had good data where they can figure out on a daily basis which group of students to work with. Again, this is a very extreme case, but it's a smart one too. It's an interesting one. But again, it required some getting permission to do this. Okay, let's go learn next generation learning. Let me talk a little bit about our platform. So this is what we do. We have a data-driven personalized learning platform, diagnostic assessments across the top, right? So we do hardcore assessments, K to 12 in reading, K to 9 in math. The thing about this when I say it's K to 9, even if you're a 6th grader, we'll go down and find your gaps if it's at kindergarten level. So we don't assume, we don't just say, oh, you're a 6th grader, you don't know 6th grade skills. Oh, here's a few 5th grade skills, you don't know those, good, I'm done. No, we go down. What, you don't know that? Let's go down lower. Let's go down lower. What do you know until we find that mastery point? That's why we're real popular in special education, because it's called finding a student's present levels. You have all this data, it goes into our engine, it generates a math course that's personalized for every student. The teacher can also scaffold and assign lessons based on what they're trying to do. So there's an automated instruction as well as a teacher-aligned instruction. And then of course you could use the data to create small groups or whole groups on a daily basis. Okay, so why does our assessment work? We're based on a diagnostic model of assessment. We're not a broad-based measure or benchmark measure where you give your 4th graders 4th grade test items with a little bit of 3rd grade items. No, within the 44 subtests of math, we break math into 44 subtests. Each one of these is a scope and sequence of skills. We go up and down to find the student's instructional point across each one. So let's take a look at place values. For instance, place value is really taught up through the end of 5th grade. Their skills, starting at the very beginning, 10s, 1s, all the way up to decimal. Sorry, flip that. Let's drill down to place value. So if this is the point of the student's mastery, place value expanded form, what you need to work on next is thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, and then finally decimal place value. So again, once you have our assessment, every single subtest translates into action, right? This is very different. We don't just do one item either. I know the student has mastery here because of a set of items they were given. I know they have non-mastery right here because of a set of items, okay? All right, that's it. I went really fast, I apologize. Let's go ahead and turn this over to Christina.
Okay, great. We're gonna go ahead, let me share my screen and we'll hop in so that you can take a look at the system.
I see your screen, looks good.
Perfect. So what we're looking at here would be your teacher dashboard. This is where they're going to find all of their students' scores at once. So as Richard mentioned, there are 44 subtests. We do break those up into 5 major strands. So you're going to have those overall scores, but then you can also drill down. So if you're noticing that a student is really low in numbers and operations, we can focus in on numbers and operations and see exactly what was tested and how they scored in each one of those subtests. Now, when it comes to reporting, we're going to look at 2 grouping reports to help group your students, because if you are going to create those small groups, you really need to know what skills you're working on. And so with our assessment, once your students take the assessment, teachers are automatically going to have those groups generated. And it's not just going to be based on, these kids have the lowest scores. It's going to give them a scope and sequence of actionable data. So here on this drop down, you're going to see all 44 of those subtests. If I wanted to work one day, let's say on decimal operations, I can go ahead and select that here, click instructional placement, and now I see my small groups created. And in addition to seeing the groups, I can see the very specific skills that they need to work on. So I know when I pull these 2 students, we're working on identifying, terminating, and repeating decimals. Whereas these four students down here still need to work on adding and subtracting decimals. So it takes that information and makes it actionable for teachers. So that way you can really plan out your instruction. And in addition to seeing those specific skills, you're going to have those grade level scores down the right side. So it starts with the hardest skill at the top, and then as you work down, the skills get easier. So again, you can change up your small groups daily, depending on what skills you're wanting to look at, by just running this report, and it'll pull the appropriate students. Or if you're planning a whole group lesson and you're trying to scaffold for those students, you can look at this report really quickly and know what kind of supports do I need to have in place during this whole group lesson in order to meet all of the students where they are. So very, very powerful report here for grouping students. And that one, again, is available for all 44 of those subtests. So as soon as you run it, you're going to get a full scope and sequence that's going to show you how you can help those students. In addition to that report, we have a really great standards report that allows you to pull up a specific standard. So if you're going to be working, let's say on standard 2.G3, we can hit apply here. And now we're going to see our students grouped a little bit differently. We're going to see which students have foundational skills that need building, which students are ready to learn that standard, and which students have already demonstrated mastery. And what's really great about this report is that it's going to, even though we don't have the standard just listed right off the bat, I know that when we unpack this standard, we're looking at skills within numbers, within 2D shapes, and within fractions. These are those foundational skills that we need to build up for these students in order for them to have success with this standard. So I can see all of them listed here, as well as all of their scores listed on the side. Richard, was there anything you wanted to add to either of those two reports before we hop into some individual reports?
No, I was just going to say this is a great report for a general ed class where you know you're going to be teaching a lesson and you need to prepare for it. You want to know which students need a little extra help. So the good thing, if you know those students right there, like Lisa and Liza needed help, you can actually hit the check box and you could actually, put them into a group and maybe assign a lesson for them. So there's a lot of cool things you can do. You say, oh, these 5 kids need some exponent review. And you can give them a little 10-minute exponent review lesson. So it's a great tool, but this is something Christina's group would teach you and train your teachers on doing, because, how do I use this report in practice? So we're not going to just expect the teachers to know how to do it. We'll show you.
Great. So those are 2 reports that are going to help with grouping and really making it easier for your teachers to work with those students. But if you wanted to work with students individually, we also have some individual level reports. One of those being your summary report. So when you click on this report, this is a really nice one to share with parents. You have your option here to show priority arrows, but you can always uncheck that box. I know it can be really disheartening if you're sending home a report full of red arrows. So you have that option here. But when you run this report, you're going to see their subtests are listed. We break out the strands. That's what you're seeing in each color-coded box. But within each strand, you're seeing exactly what was tested. And what's really powerful about this report is that it's giving a very clear present level for that student. So within numbers, I know that the student can correctly round. They're currently a quarter of a year below grade level. That's what that red arrow is indicating. But as a parent, I can look at this report and see exactly what my student is capable of doing. The teacher as well can pull it and really quickly see their present levels within each of those areas. So just a really nice 1-page overview that can explain to parents where the students are. And then in addition to that, we have a detail report. So this detail report is going to be a lengthier report, but what this is going to give you is a very clear plan of action for your students. So if you know you have some students that are particularly far behind, you can run this report and it's going to have your 5 major strands listed up here across the top. And then you're also going to have your subtests listed below in blue. So as we look at this report, I can see within numbers, again, I have that scope and sequence. And these double arrows here are letting me know this would be the next skill that the student needs to work on. So they need to work on rounding with tens, hundreds, and thousands. And then when I look to the middle, I will see a present level for that student, or an instructional goal for that student of what they need to work towards. So here would be the next skill to work on. Then as we get down to place value, I can see that there are some more skills here that the student needs to work on. And you'll see that they're color coded as well. So any skills that have red arrows next to them, that's letting you know that these 2 skills are below grade level for that student. Once we hit the black arrows, we're going to be working on skills that are on or above grade level. So even though the report's lengthy, as you scroll through it, you can really notice quickly where do they have the most gaps and then work on building those up. So as Richard mentioned, really laying that foundation for them. Once they get those foundational skills, we can build upon them to move them forward. So whether your teacher is working with the students one-on-one, or if you have an interventionist available to come in and work with them, you have a really clear plan of action. You're going to see a detailed plan of all of the skills that they need to work on in order to close those gaps. So that way we're really having meaningful instruction with the students. Anything you wanted to add on either of those two?
I was just going to say that this is an amazing report, right? Because it literally maps it all out and it's spelled out exactly what they need to work on in English. So someone could search, well, you know, identifying equivalent fractions. You could just Google it. How do a lesson in identifying equivalent fractions? So even if the student had this, and, you know, especially an older student, say, hey, look, this is what you need to work on, Richard. If you work on this, you're going to be able to, you know, get up to speed on math. These are your gaps. If I was motivated, I could go in there and just do it myself. So it's pretty powerful report. The special ed version of this report allows a special ed teacher to mine all this data to write those IEPs, write the goals at present level. So while this is 12 pages, the IEP version of this report allows this special education teacher to mine this data in an efficient manner.
And this also is only possible through a diagnostic assessment. When you're just giving a grade level benchmark assessment, then it's going to tell you if the student's on, above, or below grade level, but you're not going to get this level of data to see how far below grade level and what specific skills they need to work on. So by giving that assessment at the beginning of the year, it's going to save your teachers time in the long run, instead of having to go back and figure out, okay, are we at this 4th grade level? Are we at the 3rd grade level? The assessment does that from the get-go, and you can plan and move forward from there. And then in addition to that, we do offer formative assessments. So as your teachers work on these skills, let's say that we've spent this week working on place value with thousands, 10,000s, and 100,000s. At the end of the week, they can queue up a little quiz, just 3 to 10 questions. And then when the student takes that quiz, if they've done better, if they've mastered that skill, it's automatically going to update their reports. And in addition to that, it's going to update their EDGE lesson. So that way, those lessons that they don't need are going to fall off, and they're still getting the most up-to-date intervention based on how they're progressing throughout the year. All of that data sits together and updates here in your active pulse. It'll lay over each other. That way you have access to all of the reports, and you can easily monitor their progress throughout the year. Every student has a little progress monitoring feature. So as long as they're in the system, you're going to be able to pull up all of their data, and we can go back and really easily compare year over year. You have the ability to compare exactly what scores you would like to see. We can chart it, and we're going to be able to monitor that progress over time. So again, another great report that you can share with students or with parents. They love to see the visual and know that they're working towards something and they're making that progress as well.
And Christina is just showing the strand scores. She could drill down and show the 14 subtests within numbers and operations. So if you wanted to get more detailed and say, hey, specifically, we're working on Richard's arithmetic, you know, basic numbers and operation skills, she can actually drill down and show progress in that area too. So this is, you know, this is summative data, but you can get down and show subtest data, which is pretty amazing, right? All right.
So those were the main reports that I wanted to highlight. I know we have about 5 minutes left, so I wanted to make sure if you have any questions, that we have some time to answer those as well.
Okay, so let's take questions in a second. Let me just go ahead and just bring up my last slide. Okay, so sort of what I want to say in conclusion, you know, it's interesting. I hear a lot of complaining and people worrying about, oh, how are we ever going to come back on math? But you don't have to be a statistic, right? Become an outlier. If you take one of these models, one of those 5 things we showed you that school districts are doing, you are now an outlier and you can change and boost your scores. So in other words, change your model. Make sure you have a really good model. Don't just settle for math core 5 for 5th graders, math core 6 for 6th graders. No, you need a model of implementation, right? And so that's, you know, we're here to help you with that. We have a lot of customers who have great success stories. Christina's group, the customer success group, they'll help you with developing math models as well. Today, technology is amazing, right? Use technology to your advantage. I mean, it could really, I do feel like technology can help us in this situation. You still need great teachers, but teachers empowered with technology is like a multiplier, right? So math is ideal for personalized learning too. I mean, because it's so skills-based and there's so many gaps that develop over time, it's really important to do that. All right, so let's go ahead and take some questions here. So I'm gonna go take a look at this. Let's see. So one of the first questions is I don't really understand how is your ADAM assessment diagnostic, and how does it actually find grade level gaps many years below or above? Okay, that's a great question. So we showed that slide before about the real key here is because we break math into 44 subtests, and within each subtest, when we test something, we base it on skills. So what we do is within each of those subtests, we'll go up and down until we find a mastery point. So when we say we're, an adaptive assessment, we really are fully adaptive, and we don't put a limit on how far down or up we go. And that's the reason why we're able to do that. Okay. Let's see, another question. Let's see, can your assessment be used for general education classes in support of grade level standards? I think that's a good question. The report that Christina showed, the standards report, that's probably a really good one, because if you're trying to use it in general education, usually you're trying to hit certain areas. So in that case, because let's say you're going to be teaching Pythagorean theorem in a 7th grade class. If I run that Pythagorean theorem standard, I can see, oh, these students don't know exponents. These students don't know simple algebra, right? Because in Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Or you have to, you have to have be able to do some basic math and formulas and moving it around in an algebra equation. So I could see which students don't have that. So you would use that kind of report and find out which students need some extra skills training. And so maybe you would build it into every Friday you do prep for the next week, right? That's something that Christina's group can help you, because you're right, there are some structural changes you need to do in order to take advantage of that. I would argue that not all teachers necessarily know how to incorporate diagnostic data into their standards-based instruction. All right. Let's see what other questions we have here. One more question is, how long does the assessment take? All right, that's a good one. So kindergartners could take 10-15 minutes, right? Because there's not a lot of math that you have to cover. Now, if you had some genius kindergartner, it could take longer, because he or she might be going really far in assessment. We're not capping it, right? Again, the longest would be, 6th and 7th graders might take an hour and a half, and potentially even 2 hours for maybe that student who has a lot of gaps. But on a positive level, the first time you take the test, it's going to be the longest. Every time you take it thereafter, it's shorter, because we use previous data to know where to start from. Also, the assessment can be started and stopped at any moment. But I also like to point out, you have to think about the assessment as the first step in instruction. If you spend the time, the hour and a half or whatever it is, to do a good diagnostic, you're going to save 5 hours of wasted instruction later on. You're going to come up with your next 10 hours of instruction. It's going to be very focused and you're going to hit that acceleration rate. So assessment is a part of instruction. So don't think about it as, why are we doing this? It's a waste of time. Now, I would argue that just pure accountability benchmark testing is sometimes a waste of time. If I have a student who is really low and I'm forcing them to take MAP, and I know they're low, but they have to take a 2-hour math assessment, I would consider that a little bit of a waste, because that data is simply going to be used for accountability. But our time on a test is going to be used to optimize instruction. So think about our assessment as part of instruction. All right. I think that's it. Christina, anything else you want to add?
No, I think you covered it.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Again, reach out. You see our website URL. We will send the slides to you. We will send the video recording to you, and we look forward to potentially supporting your school districts if you need support in the future. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.